What's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Glenn, how are you?
I'm good.
We were talking about one of our really good friends, and when he is supposed to retire because he had a job interview lined up, and it turned out that if he took that, then retirement would change for him. And it got me thinking about how often we have talked about life from the academy to your very last shift. And in recent time, we've been kind of really talking about what the retirement plans look like, because, you know, I had a birthday, you have a birthday coming up. And so when that happened, well, I think always actually, we just kind of randomly talk about things. Anytime something bad happens in California, like the projection of our gas prices in California going over $8 a gallon come 2026 because of our governor. That's wild. We just talk about retirement and like getting out of California, and should we buy another house now and I stay here and then you commute to work. And, you know, we talked about a condo that we're considering in Florida, and like all these different things. And so I think that a lot of the times people don't realize that there is so much that takes place in between then, actually monumentous things that take place that kind of build up to that. And so I thought that today we can kind of chit chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, let's go buy that condo and let's move. And it's so important, not only because, like, especially in the first responder realm, we go over critical incidents in our head. We go through different scenarios. We work through these problems before they become problems on a regular basis, for calls for service, for everything but our own lives. And that's why, like, for Ashley and I, like, we'll snowball these ideas and we push out that information amongst each other to say, hey, what about this? What about that?
Yeah, and working as a first responder in particular, there are so many elements that are really defining within your career. And one of them that I put here is your first critical incident. So it could be your first fatal crash, your structure fire, a foot pursuit, anything that has sort of high stakes to it. It's a moment where that training actually meets real life. And because of that, there's this emotional impact that things actually become real.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm trying to think, what was my first critical incident? And like, for me, I don't remember. Well,
something that comes up for me is we had just bought 2 street bikes, and later on you're like, they're hand picking brains off of the pavement to put them into a bag, you know. It could be something like that.
Yeah. And there's so many that's where there's so many incidents like that where there's not like one that stood out in my early career as, oh, this was bad. I have some funny stories from early on in my career, or some really good arrests that I remember, but I don't remember the negative ones per se.
We also have the first time that you made a mistake that cost something. So it could be missing a detail in a report, making a call under pressure, any kind of misjudging in a situation. And this sticks because mistakes often bring up a sort of element of shame. They should, anyways, if you're a good police officer. But it also teaches us a lesson that really no training ever could.
And I can remember this, like, my first mistake that I made was I lost a business card for my victim's information from a report I took when I was in phase 1. And that was such a great learning experience for me. Yeah, I was able to recover and get all the information I needed. But I remember my FTO was understanding, and he said, well, how are you going to fix it? And he let me problem solve that, to where to this day, not only do I remember his response and how he dealt with me, I remember not to lose or not to forget that information, to where it's not going to be a hindrance anymore. It's learning from it.
I'm glad that you mentioned your FTO, because I also put on here mentorship that changed your trajectory. So having a field training officer who believed in you or who called you out when you needed it the most, this kind of thing really sticks, because the right person at the right time is going to be able to shape your leadership style for your entire career.
And I think that's important. That's what I try to teach my FTO officers to this day, is don't just harp on the negativity that these guys are doing, like these newer officers coming on that you're training. Is you need to be mentors, you need to be leaders for them and show them and teach them. Don't just say, well, you screwed this up and this is going to reflect on their eval today, because that doesn't teach them anything.
Yeah, I also have on here the call that you still think about. And I know a lot of people in our Police, Fire, Military, and Families Facebook group, they talk about this a lot. It could be a child death, it could be a suicide call, or just a situation where you felt helpless. Something like this really sticks because some trauma leaves a mark, even if you think that you've moved on from it.
Holding on to those calls, you're going to have that stuff that you go to, that you experience within your career, whether it's something that kind of affects you negatively, positively, whatever it may be. But inevitably, you're going to harbor some emotions, some feelings towards those incidents because you see the worst of the worst all the time. And there's going to be that dynamic to where it's not holding on to it in a negative way, but recognizing it and letting it go.
Another example of this is that day that you realize that it wasn't just about the job anymore. So it could have been showing up on a day off, mentoring somebody, or even saving a life. I think that there could be a moment in your career when the job actually became your mission. And for a lot of people, and I personally don't believe this is a healthy thing, but it becomes their identity.
Yeah, it's having that divide and being there, showing support for your people. Like and this is the perfect example. I was cleaning the horse stall yesterday and one of my guys texted me and said, hey, you told me to call you about this report. And I couldn't remember. I read so many reports on a daily basis. I couldn't remember specifically which one it was. So he calls me and he starts explaining to me what the situation was. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I talked to him about that incident and explained to him, okay, well, what about this? I'm not just saying, hey, you screwed this up, like you need to fix it. I'm saying, okay, well, what are your thoughts about this? How can you change it to make it read better? Because he just needed to adjust his report and he found the solution for himself. I wasn't there. All I knew it was lacking.
Yeah, and I think that you can either take all of these different elements in your career and you can just move on from them. But what we can also do is reflect on them, and then we can all grow from our career defining moments that we've had. And I think it's important to do that, to just take the time to revisit and don't avoid these, and making space to look back, whether it's journaling, you can talk it through like you and I right now. That's exactly what we're doing. And I think that it's valuable to do that. And most importantly, learning from what went wrong and not just what goes right.
And it's so funny that as you're speaking about like effective leaders throughout your career and you have those memorable moments. And I remember this one sergeant, and when I first got to know him, he was a detective and then he promoted a sergeant and became my sergeant. And there's instances, if I think out throughout my career of instances of a good leader, like he's the first one who comes to mind every time, because he was that detective where we were sitting out on a homicide for hours and hours. He would just come, oh, here's a Gatorade, here's a water here. Like he would take care of his people, but he's the detective investigating the case. Like he has a lot of work he has to do. But not only that, he comes out to, we're fighting with this guy and this guy's just being an ass. And he's the first one who goes, why are you attacking my guys? And he screams and yells at him and does some other things that, but it's those instances that stand out of like, he fights for me, and he's not doing anything shady by any means, but he stands up and he fights for his people, which it's important to remember things like that because you can formulate your own leadership styles based off of those people.
Yeah, and I really like that story because I feel like it helps to create a safer atmosphere, because in turn what happens when you have a leader that exemplifies this type of behavior, anybody underneath them or around them in their sphere of influence, they're going to do everything in their power to protect that man, whether it's physically, whether it's politically. They're going to kind of create this force within the force, and this happens all of the time. We see all kinds of little clicks that take place like that. Some of them are healthy, like what we're talking about. Some of them aren't. And so I think that's great. And I also put on here that it's so important to pass things like this on to the next generation. And the way to do that is through our storytelling, because they hold so much power. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.